now diving into, so if you haven't seen it yet, watch the last video. So video 1 talks about the study cycle. But now we're going to talk about like studying, that process. And I guess kind of even starting with like, what is studying versus learning, and what kind of things should we be doing in those study times?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to talk to students about studying is like having a goal, having a purpose. And you should hopefully have a little bit of a purpose for your learning too. But the way that the study cycle is this larger sort of cycle of learning, even within your individual study sessions, we're mimicking that little cycle on a smaller scale. So we're still hopefully doing the preview, do the thing, review. We're just doing it in a more compacted time frame and with a more specific goal. So the preview part of this is really about setting your intention. What are you hoping to get out of this? And that's something that you want to think about with like, how much time do I have, right? Like how much, what am I expecting to cover? If I have 10 minutes, because you can study in 10 minutes, but you can only study 10 minutes worth of stuff, right? Like if I'm in a language class, I might be able to learn one new verb conjugation in that 10 minutes. I'm not going to be able to learn 50. Right.
Like learn one bone and its features, not all of the bones.
If I'm in anatomy, one bone is maybe 10 minutes and not an entire arm of bones, right? So thinking about how much time you have. And so that goal, I think, is one of the things to like draw back to your actual question about the difference between learning and studying is often what sort of feels like it differentiates that for me. So learning is when you want to be able to like encode that information so that you can recall it and use it at a different time or in a different situation. Studying is how you're going to get to that, right?
That's exactly how I think of it.
Targeted process, right? So you do want to think about that bigger picture of like, what do I need to learn for this class? And if you're like, I have no idea what I need to learn for this class, pro tip, look at the syllabus. I know that is like an archaic document.
Or objectives, right?
And specifically look for the learning objectives in the syllabus, because that is going to be one required by any any class that you're taking in college, because that's how colleges stay colleges.
Fair.
That's how we continue to be like approved to be colleges, is we have these learning objectives. And they should be in the syllabus so you actually know exactly, to some degree, what the professor is going to expect you to know.
And I mean, keep in mind, like sometimes these syllabus objectives are the big picture. So it will help with like motivation or kind of like understanding where this is going to fall in like your career path. And then there might be a separate document for like the specific objectives of that chapter.
Unit or chapter, right? So there, your syllabus is going to have the big picture for the class. So especially if you're looking at like final exams, that's the place you want to go. And then if you have a really good professor, they will have like a unit. Wow, I'd seen it.
Or a chapter.
Great chapter.
For something else.
Yeah, excellent. Right. So your professor is probably providing you with some of this information. Like you don't have to do all of this work yourself. Use your resources. So taking a look at those objectives and like, okay, what do I need to learn for this session? And so like we talked about, it could be like, I need to learn the parts of this one bone, but it also could be like, I need to understand how this system works, like how all these organs fit together, or what this like reaction chain looks like. We're getting a little out of my depth.
That's like
metaphors right now, or science examples.
I appreciate that.
But I try. So we're going to set our goal. We're going to understand our time, and then we're going to study, which is where a lot of students are like, so what does that look like?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, just rereading your notes is not doing it for you.
Yeah.
It's not challenging your...
I think that even might be another... So we're going to do this as like and then watch the next video for the very specifics. But I think the biggest thing is, as you were kind of getting at, like the difference between active and passive. And so I'm going to throw some science out real quick. This as like also like a watch the next video. Is when you're looking at the brain's peak levels for the hormone called cortisol, which kind of help us encode memory. If you're doing passive stuff like rewatching the notes, listening to the videos, it's not going to get that level of that hormone to kind of draw your attention and actually solidify memory. So you need to be doing things that challenge you, maybe even stress you just a little, to get to that peak level. If you go too far and it's something that you're not ready for yet, and that's where that preview or that first part where you're kind of like setting your objectives is kind of also setting your difficulty level, which again, another video, which we'll be talking about difficulty levels. So as we're looking at kind of the active learning, you want to be in that sweet spot where it's not too easy, not too hard, because if you go too easy, passive, it's not going to solidify into long-term memory. It'll feel very productive. And I think that's where students get really frustrated. Like I sat down for 4 hours. I felt like I really knew it, But what you did is you really just kind of worked in that short-term working memory, and it didn't get put into long-term storage because you didn't challenge it.
Yeah. And a lot of times, so the one sort of trick I have is like, if you're not making that like scrunchy face,
Yes, I have those permanent wrinkles.
right? Like the scrunchy face is what you want. You don't want the like, oh my God, I want to cry. This is so hard. That's too much. You're way beyond into your cortisol levels.
Yes.
But you also don't just want to be like making a normal bored or like
Yeah.
lax face because you're then not working hard enough.
It's
Right,
this
so, like,
it's the I'm confused. It's right in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the like wiggles in between
Yeah.
up there. That's the face you want to be making if your brain is working just hard enough to like be actually challenged and encoding and like building all those fun new neural pathways. That's how you kind of know you're in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that like, you know, if you like wander around the library and you see people's faces,
That'll be a fun game.
probably tell who's actually actively studying because you just take a look at their sketchy face, and the folks that are not making that face maybe need to work a little bit harder. But I think the really thing about active learning and the thing that's going to make you make that scrunchy learning face is having to do something with the information, right? If you're just rereading your notes, you aren't really doing anything
Right.
with the information. You need to be
Here's
rearranging,
this. It's going in and out.
right? You need
Yeah.
to be rearranging it. You need to to be able to like apply it in some
Mhm.
way, right? You need to be manipulating it, whether physically, like moving
Mhm.
flashcards around or something like that, or just like, okay, if I take this and change a variable, what happens then, right? Or if I put this in a new situation, how do I understand this differently? And that's the stuff that's going to be able to really encode into the
Mhm.
brain, not just the like, okay, I've read the same sentence 5 times,
Right.
so now I can repeat it back to you right now, but in 2 days, am I going to be able to
Right.
read?
And it's really not what instructors are looking for when they're doing assessments. Just kind of wrapping us up, the last thing in that studying part was kind of evaluating the study
Yeah.
session. And I think even just kind of paying attention to where your wrinkles are, part of that
Is one evaluation point. Yeah. So different ways. So one key part of the like review piece of it. So we've got preview, do the thing, review. One key part of the review is like, how effective was that?
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you may need to, you want to do the review at the close of each session, and that's going to be like pulling out the key points. What are the things that I learned? What do I know now that I didn't know before? You want to think about like, how effective was that? What did it feel like? Did it feel like I was learning? How scrunchy was my face, right? Might be a just fun shorthand for that. But then you might also think about like, that's the immediate review, but then the next day when you go to start your next study session, in your preview, maybe think about like, okay, what do I remember from the last session? Which is both a like review from the last session and also a preview of like, okay, for this next goal setting session, what do I actually remember from my last study?
And how can I tie the new stuff into that?
How do I tie it in? And do I need to go back to that stuff to better understand it and really encode it? So again, that's what sort of brings us back to the top of the cycle.
Thank you.